Thank you for participating in this study. Please make sure you signed in so you receive your extra credit. Please read and follow the instructions you receive throughout the study. Your responses are anonymous, so you can respond openly and honestly to the study questions. Please do not discuss this study with anyone else because sessions are running throughout the week. Before getting started, I'm going to spend a few minutes briefly describing the task and provide some background information. You should have a packet of paper handouts, an open Excel spreadsheet, and an open internet browser. Today, you will estimate the fundamental value per share of a firm's stock and indicate how much you would be willing to pay per share for the firm's stock. There are several common ways of estimating a firm's fundamental value. In this case, you will use discounted residual earnings analysis facilitated by an Excel template on your computer. Each year, a firm's residual earnings, also called abnormal earnings, is the excess of its total earnings minus its normal earnings. Normal earnings are calculated by multiplying the firm's beginning book value of equity by its cost of equity capital. Think of the cost of equity capital as the return that shareholders require for their investment in a firm. Therefore, normal earnings reflect the earnings the firm must earn in a period to provide shareholders their required return. In other words, the firm should generate earnings on the equity that it holds that are at least equal to what the equity costs the firm. Then, residual earnings are the amount of earnings generated by a firm that exceed what the firm should earn, i.e., earnings above and beyond its cost of equity capital. Put another way, residual earnings are generated when a firm's return on equity exceeds its cost of equity. The firm's fundamental value is a function of three things. 1, the current book value of equity. 2, the present value of short-term residual earnings. And 3, continuing value. Let's talk about each of these inputs in more detail. You will use the Excel template provided to calculate a firm's fundamental value. The template looks like this. All you need to do is fill in the yellow boxes. Please follow along on your paper handout with sample firm A at the top and the spreadsheet example I am showing on the screen in this video. Please do not fill out the Excel spreadsheet on your computer yet. This is just an example. So step 1, opening book value of equity will be provided for you. The first two values you need to input are current period revenue in box 1 and current period operating expenses in box 2. In the actual study, you will be provided with the firm's balance sheet and income statement. Decide whether you believe the revenue and total operating expense numbers reported by the firm are your best estimates of true revenue and operating expenses. If you believe they are, you will enter these numbers in box 1 and box 2 at face value. You could also adjust revenue or operating expenses by increasing or decreasing the reported number. In applying the residual income model, it is important to develop a forecast of future residual income based on your best estimate of recurring items. There are at least two situations where you might want to remove items from revenue or expenses when forecasting residual earnings. First, the company might engage in accounting practices that overstate or understate revenues or expenses relative to your best estimate. For example, if the firm has a specific financial accounting policy that led to reported revenue being higher than your best estimate of revenue, you can decrease reported revenue to arrive at adjusted revenue. Second, companies often report non-recurring or one-time items as part of revenue or operating expenses. You can remove these items when forecasting residual earnings. For example, if the firm has a non-recurring expense, you can subtract it from reporting operating expenses to arrive at adjusted total operating expenses. You will put your best estimate of true revenue and total operating expenses in boxes 1 and 2. Let's update the spreadsheet for our example firm A. Firm A's opening book value of equity is $29 million and is already reported in the spreadsheet. Firm A's reported revenue for this year is $45 million, and Firm A's reported total operating expenses for this year are $30 million. If I think $45 million and $30 million are my best estimates of true revenue and operating expenses, I will put those amounts in boxes 1 and 2, or I can adjust them. For example, if Firm A has a specific financial accounting policy causing them to report $2 million of revenue more than my best estimate of revenue, I will subtract the $2 million from reported revenue and put my adjusted revenue of $43 million in box 1. Or if Firm A has a non-recurring expense of $1 million, I will subtract that from reported operating expenses and put adjusted operating expenses of $29 million. Once we input these amounts, the Excel spreadsheet provides us with an updated estimate of true net income in box 3. This amount is $4 million. Step 2. Then you will estimate how you believe net income will grow in the short term. Analysts and investors typically forecast net income for only a few years into the future, and then forecast a long-term growth rate for remaining years, which we'll talk about soon. You might want to consider facts about the firm in the case to estimate how its net income will grow in the next 4 accounting periods. A good place to start is current net income and past net income. If current and past net income growth is your best guess of future net income growth, you can use this growth rate to predict future net income. However, if you think future net income growth will not continue at the same rate, you can adjust the future net income growth rate up or down. Put these estimates in boxes 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's update the spreadsheet for Firm A. Assume Firm A's past net income growth rate was 9%, and that is my best estimate of future net income growth. I can input a formula in Excel to calculate the net income forecast for the next 4 years. So in box 4, I will put in the formula equals C11 times 1.09. This reflects that I expect the prior period net income to grow by 9%. I can then copy and paste this formula to boxes 5, 6, and 7. If you think the net income growth rate will change over the next 4 years, you can use different growth rates. Step 3. Next, you will make an estimate of long-term growth or continuing value. This is based on the long-term growth rate in residual earnings. This number should be close to the rate of inflation of 2% or the industry average of 2% if you believe that the firm has an average competitive advantage. You might decrease it slightly if you believe it lags behind its peers, or increase it slightly if you believe it exceeds its peers. This goes in box 9. Let's update the spreadsheet for Firm A. I expect Firm A has an average competitive advantage, so I will input the industry average of 2%. Finally, you will estimate the firm's cost of capital. If you believe the firm has average risk compared to other firms in the industry, use the industry average of 7%. If the firm is riskier than the industry average, adjust the cost of capital up between 0.1% and 2%. If the firm is less risky than the industry average, adjust the cost of capital down between 0.1% and 2%. Enter this in box 8. Let's update the spreadsheet for Firm A. I expect Firm A has an average risk compared to other firms in the industry, so I will input the industry average of 7%. One important note, make sure that your long-term growth rate in box 9 does not exceed the cost of capital estimate in box 8. This will give you an unreliable estimate of fundamental value because this relationship cannot exist in reality. Therefore, make sure your long-term growth rate is less than your cost of capital estimate. My long-term growth rate of 2% is less than my cost of capital estimate of 7%, so I'm okay. We have filled in all the yellow boxes in our spreadsheet, so let's go over the results. A firm's fundamental value is the sum of its current book value of equity and discounted future residual earnings. The present value of future residual earnings has 2 components, one for short-term future residual earnings and one for long-term future residual earnings, or continuing value. Cell C20 contains my current book value of equity. Cell G20 contains the present value from the short-term residual earnings, and cell K20 contains continuing value. The 3 cells are summed in cell M20 and divided by the number of shares outstanding in cell M22 to give you estimated fundamental value per share in cell M24. Firm A's fundamental value per share is $69.76. In the real study, you will have an Excel template and a paper handout just like the ones I showed you. You can use these to calculate estimated fundamental value. Then you will type the estimates for each box into the online survey. Finally, you will assess how much money you are willing to pay per share of the firm's stock at different investment levels. Typically, you would not be willing to pay more than the fundamental value per share of stock. If I invest a small percentage of my inheritance, like 5%, I would be willing to pay my estimate of fundamental value less transactions costs. So for example, on line 4, the maximum price I would be willing to pay per share is $64.76. As I invest more of my inheritance is at risk, so I'm willing to pay a lower price to compensate for the risk I'm taking. The price I'm willing to pay per share should increase from line 1 to line 4. The amounts you put on these lines should depend on your own preferences. This concludes the instructions. If you have any questions at any time during the study, please raise your hand. You can take your headphones off, click Next Page, and start the study. Thanks again for participating.